Having said this, I would like to take you to a journey with me. And that is, I will give you a life story. It's going to be an emotional journey. And why I give you this story is because it is so relevant to what we do every day. Jane was a young woman as a social worker. She met Joe. Joe was going through his residency. They liked each other. They fell in love. They dated each other. After a few years, they got married. They had lots of hopes. In their hopes, they were thinking that they're going to have a couple children. They're going to have their house. They're going to put their children in education, grow, have good life. But things did not happen the way that they thought. Although they were planning quite good, but it didn't happen that way. First of all, before they get married, Joe was introduced to Jane's family. They liked him very much. He was a good guy. Jane's father, who was born in Upper Michigan, in a small town, did not have exposure to others as much. He knew the surroundings and the family, and everybody was like him. His son, about many years before, went to the army, was deployed, and was doing great. However, unfortunately, because of the war, he got killed. It had a major impact on this man's life, on Jane's life. So what happened was that when they were going to get married, everybody knew each other, everybody liked each other. It was announced by Jane that, Joe was born in Iraq. He's a Muslim. The father, who had lost his son in the war, the first Gulf War, didn't know what to do because he loved Joe. Because he said, he's so American. How can it be? But that's how it happened. I want you to feel how the father was feeling at the time. He was devastated because of the stereotype that he had. Because he was calling Joe his second son. But he couldn't contain himself because of his background. So what happened was that after several months anyway, they settled things down. He accepted Joe back to the house. They got married. But he couldn't really deal with it. They worked it out, they became friends again. So he graduated from his residency, Joe. He became a pediatrician. After about 4 or 5 years, they had their first child. She was doing fine. Everything was great. They thought after a few years they need to have a sister or brother for her. So Jane became pregnant again. At that time, it was about maybe 6 weeks into her pregnancy, they were going to visit the parents, the grandparents. And it was an early morning. Jane lovingly put her hand on Joe's shoulder. In a moment, he lost track of where he was. It was an accident. In that accident, Jane's lung became punctured. Joe went to coma. He suffered a brain injury. The daughter was fine. I don't take you to the whole story. Jane lost a lot of blood. Needed to have surgery, put on many medications. Joe got better. After about a year, they went back together. And after the birth of the child, they were again happy. The problem was that this child was not interacting with them the way that they thought. Although she was quite engaged, but didn't start talking the way that other kids do. Didn't start walking or crawling the way that other kids did. Well, Joe was a pediatrician, but I forgot to tell you, after the injury and head trauma, although he was trying to work, but he really couldn't concentrate. He couldn't organize himself. He couldn't strategize. He couldn't do the things that he needed to do. He couldn't focus. He couldn't pay as much attention. So he was working kind of part-time. Anyway, they took the kid to a good pediatrician, and they found out that yes, she is developmentally delayed and disabled and has mental retardation. Remember the hopes that they had? They all kind of vanished. Again. What happened was that Jane became depressed. Well, when we go depressed, when we become depressed, we interact less with people. So this kid did not have as much stimulation as he needed. Our brain works all the time, needs the stimulation. The other child didn't get as much stimulation. Joe's behavior had changed. He was a kind man, but he became aggressive because of brain injury. Somewhat abusive because of frustrations and brain injury. He never touched alcohol before. He became an alcoholic. Jane's father said, "I knew it. He was lying." So he had a proof. Went to the house after one fight that Jane and Joe had. Punched him on the face. He got arrested. They settled things down again. And everything went back to the normal of abnormality. until he had a stroke. The grandfather, Jane's father. His behavior changed. He was really good at math. His hope was that he could put his grandchildren into school to become engineers and help them with their math. He couldn't do any of those. In fact, when he was in the hospital, one of the tests that they did for him and with him was, the doctor said, well, this is the face of a clock. Can you put the hands to show it is 11:10? He said, no problem. He put one hand on 11, one put hand on 10. You and I will not do such a thing. And remember, he was really good at math. This is a very simple task. They asked him, why don't you count down from 20 backwards? Well, he started 20, 19, 18. He lost concentration somewhere. They asked him to name 4 objects which start with S. And he started doing that. Then they asked him to do 4 objects which start with N. And then as he started doing, they found him saying, or going back with S. In other words, things intruded into his operation and mind. They concluded that he had frontal damage. In other words, his stroke took part of his frontal cortex out. It was the same thing which happened with Joe, in fact, in the car accident. What happened was that when he had the accident, his head hit a bad part and really was damaged. He had frontal lobe damage, and that's why his behavior changed. That's why he couldn't concentrate. That's why he couldn't do any of those. The kid who had or was labeled as having mental retardation had issues as well. So when they take him to the doctor, he was about 5 years old maybe, and they were testing his ability to see how he can postpone his gratification, and he couldn't. He couldn't understand, he couldn't do. For example, they said that, okay, we're going to put 1 marshmallow in here, and then we're going to go out, and if you don't touch this, we'll give you 2 marshmallows. Well, they went out, came back, he had taken the marshmallow. He couldn't postpone gratification. It's called marshmallow test, in a way. He was also impulsive and damaged. What I want you to exercise in here is to put yourselves in these people's shoes at each single time and see how they feel. How they feel toward each other, how they feel toward others, and how much suffering they have. Can you feel that? Yes, no. Can someone tell me what you feel? Frustration, anger, sadness, disgust at times. I discuss many things with you. Many other emotions. What you felt with this story, it is called empathy. Now that we have this story, let's erase it. And what we will do is this. Jane and Joe got married. They had 2 beautiful kids. And everybody was happy. Grandfather didn't have the stroke. In fact, he overcame his stigma, stereotype that he had made because of what has happened. And they were all living happily ever after. So that's the story. Now you understand what empathy is. What I want you to do is I want you to take your shoes that you had put on, in other words, as I said, asked you to feel what they felt. You tried and you did put your feet in their shoes. And what I want you to do is give those shoes back to them, because we erased the story. With every patient, in every scenario, that's what happens. And what you need to do at the end of the day, at the end of your visit, to take those shoes off. But please learn temporarily to put those shoes on so you can feel what the patient is feeling. Because everybody is looking for this. Everybody.